Hi, hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Amber, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my review for It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On by Malaika Jabali. And this one, hold on, my puppy is trying to get over here. Okay. With this one, I will say that I just randomly saw this at the library. I picked it up not reading the synopsis or the back cover or anything. So I didn't realize that this was going to have like a more humorous, light tone to it. So I think the title tells you what this all is about. It's supposed to be kind of like a beginner's guide of capitalism and how to break up with it, as it says. So my thing about this is that even with the title, I should have like known that she was going to do a lot of comparisons with the breaking up with toxic relationships, breaking up, all that stuff, breaking up with them, break up with capitalism. There's going to be a lot of comparisons. I didn't like all those comparisons because it got a little over the top. Like it got too much to the point that I felt like it took over what she was trying to actually say. There's a lot of her just talking about the history of capitalism, and I don't really feel like I ever got the vibe, like the whole how do we live within a society that is capitalistic, and how can we be anti-capitalist in that society? You know what I mean? Like, kind of studying more of like those steps, and I don't think I ever got that. It's really interesting because I don't remember this book very much, so I apologize. I read this like towards in the beginning of December, like right in the beginning. So I don't know like why I don't remember. All I do know is that I had issues with her tone and the casualness of it. I think that if I had read the synopsis, or the premise, I would have like known that it was gonna be like that. I was kind of just expecting her to just give you what you need to know. Instead, I got a little bit more of history, and it centers Black history more than anything. And I get that because she is Black. She is also somebody who studied Black history in her like BA, I think. So I get that. But the fact is that this book is a general history, like a general book on capitalism, and I find it frustrating that every time that we talk about erasure of history, any kind of history around the U.S., and capitalism, I'm just it completely ignores indigenous in this discussion, and that lacks intersectionality, especially because when you're talking about capitalism, the very aspect of colonization was capitalism. They committed genocide. They enslaved the indigenous folks. They stole their fucking land, their culture, their English, their language, for the sake of what? Money, greed, and land. It all is capitalism. And I think that she could have included that, acknowledged it, like, and she really doesn't. Like, she does bring up colonization, but she doesn't tie it in a more, cohesive way with everything else that she's talking about. And she doesn't, like, make a very clear point about, like, that indigenous and those who were enslaved from Africa that were brought over here are all tied into what? Capitalism. She could have just tied it all together and connected it all, because that is what both of them are experiencing. I find it so frustrating how there's such a disconnect with the treatment of Black people in this country and the treatment of indigenous people, considering that there are a lot of parallels to it, and it's all connected too, okay? Everything is connected. Everything that is wrong with this country is stemmed from capitalism and racism and colonization. Colonization was like the first step towards everything that was wrong. Like, did we really think that this country was going to get better when it started with genocide? I don't know. Anyways, that's beside the point here. It is part of the point, but it's not like the full point. I didn't really care for the casual tone. I felt that she was a little too sarcastic and a bit maybe too harsh for people who were coming into this book with maybe like preconceived ideas. They were just trying to get an understanding of like how they were supposed to be anti-capitalist in a society that is built on capitalism. And the tone that she uses can be a bit abrasive and may not bring those people who are hesitant in. And I felt like she was saying, like, when she first introduces the book and everything, that she was trying to bring people in. And I don't know if this was going to happen. I felt like she was dealing with emotions, and understandably so. Um, we have the right to have emotions. I don't know if this was the right place and time to be expressing those emotions. Like this is supposed to be a book, a how-to kind of thing, like guide of some sorts. And I don't know if I ever got that. I can't really remember anything that this book had to say because I just found it. Actually, maybe that's why I don't remember. Because maybe I DNF'd it. I don't know. All I know is that I think that it has a good premise. It has a good idea, and I think that there is a certain group of people that she's probably talking to, and I feel like it's probably the younger people who are more willing to deal with that kind of casual, sarcastic tone. I just don't know if this was the right way to go about it, but if it reaches people, yay. If it connects with somebody, yes. I just think that we need to be more intersectional when we're talking about things, and also let's stop ignoring the indigenous that still exist today, who are still fighting for their rights, their sacred lands, and for their autonomy. They are still here. They helped, like. And I feel like when you're ignoring that, you're ignoring how tied up in everything that they are. You can see them at every moment of our country's history, and I find it frustrating that people continue to ignore that. Okay? And you don't have to not mention, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to sacrifice what you're trying to talk about. I'm not saying, like, if somebody was writing a book and it was centered on Black history fully, um, you may mention, obviously, because Indigenous were part of the Black rights movement, the civil rights movements, rather, during that time, I'm sure, if I remember correctly from certain things I've read. And so it's not like they're gonna always not be there, but I feel like if you're centering, like if it's supposed to be like centering specific parts of history, and it is specifically about Black history, then I would not fully expect them to bring up Indigenous. But when you're talking about in a general book like this, I do expect it, especially when you're talking about how the country is framed on capitalism, and you don't even bring up until like longer, and it's just like a side note, and not in the, like they dealt with being enslaved, they dealt with their land being stolen, their culture, all these things that's been generated. That's the final aspect of capitalism because that is the backbone of this country. It started with colonization. That's how, anyways, I've already talked about this. I give it like a 2.5 to 3 stars. I think that, somebody's going to get something out of it, probably more towards the younger audience, but, it is what it is. And I will see you in the next review.